Never ever say this forbidden name 5 times in front of a mirror because something will come looking for you. The film opens by introducing a graduate student named Helen Lyle, who is working on her thesis about the various urban legends that have spread throughout society. Together with her best friend and research partner, Bernadette, Helen begins interviewing several students to collect mysterious stories that many people believe to be true. One of the students shares a story that he claims actually happened. He tells them about a young woman named Clara who was babysitting at the Johnson family's house when her secret boyfriend Billy came to visit her. In the middle of his story, the student suddenly asks Helen if she has ever heard of the legend of Candyman. According to him, Candyman is the vengeful spirit of a murderer whose right hand has been replaced by a metal hook. Legend has it that anyone who stands in front of a mirror and says Candyman's name 5 times will cause the terrifying figure to appear right behind them. The student explains that Billy managed to say Candyman's name 4 times, but was too frightened to say it a 5th time. Unexpectedly, Clara says Candyman's name for the 5th time herself, just before turning off the lights.
Candyman, 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 Candyman.
No one ever got past 4. I have a surprise for you. Candyman.
Moments later, Candyman actually appears and brutally murders both Clara and the baby she was babysitting, while Billy survives the horrific incident but is left mentally traumatized. After hearing the story, Helen realizes that the legend of Candyman is widely known among the public. She continues interviewing other students to find out when the legend first began and why so many people believe it. Besides interviewing students, Helen also continues researching Candyman through various references available in the university's computer lab.
Mirror and say his name 5 times, he'll appear. Candyman.
While she is deeply focused on her research, a janitor named Henrietta enters the room to ask for permission to clean it. Henrietta accidentally notices that Helen is researching Candyman. Although she admits she doesn't know much about the legend herself, she mentions that one of her friends knows a great deal about it. Her friend, Kitty, also works as a janitor at the university and has relatives living in Cabrini Green, a neighborhood long associated with the legend of Candyman. Intrigued, Helen immediately asks to meet Kitty. Henrietta gladly agrees and goes to fetch her, as Kitty is cleaning one of the campus hallways at the time. When Helen asks what she knows, Kitty tells her about the horrifying murder of a woman named Ruthie Jean that took place some time earlier. According to the story she heard, Ruthie was in her bathroom when she suddenly heard loud banging noises, as if someone was trying to break through the wall of her apartment. Terrified, she immediately called 911 and reported that someone was breaking into her apartment through the wall. However, the dispatcher assumed she was hallucinating and did not take her call seriously. Ruthie called again, desperately begging for help, but once again, no one believed her. By the time the police finally arrived, it was already too late. Ruthie was found dead, her body covered in horrific wounds caused by a sharp metal hook. Ever since that incident, many people have believed that Candyman was responsible for her murder. Even so, Kitty admits that she only knows the story through rumors and cannot say for certain whether Candyman truly exists. Nevertheless, the story only fuels Helen's curiosity even more and convinces her that the legend of Candyman is closely connected to Cabrini Green. Helen's curiosity about Ruthie's case leads her back to the university library to continue her research. She begins searching through old newspaper archives using a microfilm reader, a machine commonly used to view newspaper records from previous years. After carefully going through countless pages, Helen finally discovers an article about Ruthie's murder. She immediately prints a copy of the article and brings it home to show Bernadette.
This isn't one of your fairy tales. A woman got killed here.
As they read it together, their attention is drawn to a photograph of the Cabrini Green apartment complex featured in the article. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary apartment building. However, Helen compares it with a photo of the apartment where she lives in Lincoln Village. To her surprise, the two buildings are almost identical. Even the layout of each apartment unit is exactly the same. Helen explains that Lincoln Village was originally built as a public housing project, just like Cabrini Green. However, after construction was completed, the government realized that Lincoln Village was located too close to the wealthy Gold Coast neighborhood and lacked any barrier separating it from the surrounding upscale area. As a result, the building was later renovated. The concrete walls were covered with plaster to give the apartments a more luxurious appearance, and every unit was eventually sold as condominiums. Although the exterior was completely transformed, the internal structure remained exactly the same as when it was first built. To prove her theory, Helen takes Bernadette into the bathroom of her apartment. She removes the medicine cabinet from the wall and reveals that there is no solid wall behind it.
See, there's no wall there. It's only a medicine chest separating us from the other apartment. There.
Psych.
The only thing separating her apartment from the neighboring unit is an empty space hidden behind the medicine cabinet. This discovery makes Helen realize how Ruthie's killer most likely entered her apartment. Rather than forcing the front door open, the killer simply broke through the back of the medicine cabinet and crawled through the narrow passage connecting the two apartments. That was likely how the horrific murder was carried out without anyone noticing. After putting the medicine cabinet back in place, Helen and Bernadette jokingly stand in front of the bathroom mirror and begin saying Candyman's name. Bernadette only has the courage to say it 4 times, while Helen casually finishes the ritual by saying it a 5th time.
You know, Candyman.
Candyman, Candyman, Candyman.
You have to do it 5 times. Come on, go. Candyman.
The two of them simply laugh it off, convinced that the legend is nothing more than a scary story meant to frighten people. Later that night, after Bernadette leaves, Helen is surprised when her husband, Trevor, returns home from the university where he works as a professor.
Sorry I scared you.
What time is it?
It's late.
The following day, Helen and Bernadette return to the Cabrini Green apartment complex to continue their research. Although Bernadette feels the neighborhood is dangerous, Helen insists on going because she believes the residents have long associated many of the crimes committed there with Candyman.
I just want you to think, okay? The gangs hold this whole neighborhood hostage.
We've got a real shot here, Bernadette.
All right.
As soon as they arrive, several young men become suspicious and mistake them for undercover police officers. Fortunately, Helen and Bernadette avoid any confrontation and make their way into one of the rundown apartment buildings. They follow the hallway until they reach the apartment where Ruthie was murdered.
See, I was right. The layout is identical.
Inside the bathroom, Helen once again finds the opening behind the medicine cabinet that connects the apartment to the neighboring unit. Without hesitation, she crawls through the narrow passage by herself while Bernadette stays behind, repeatedly warning her to be careful. After squeezing through the opening, Helen discovers a hidden room containing a massive mural of Candyman's face with his mouth stretched wide open. She also notices countless candy wrappers scattered across the floor. Curious, she picks one up and opens it. Instead of finding only candy inside, she discovers a sharp razor blade hidden in the wrapper. Before leaving, Helen photographs everything in the room as evidence for her research. Once she has documented the area, she crawls back through the opening behind the medicine cabinet. However, before the two women can leave, they are suddenly confronted by a woman named Anne, who arrives walking her dog. Anne is surprised to find strangers inside the abandoned apartment where Ruthie was murdered. Helen and Bernadette quickly introduce themselves as graduate students, researching the legend of Candyman. Moments later, they hear the sound of a baby crying from Anne's apartment. She invites them inside while comforting her baby boy, Anthony.
I just want to raise my child good. I'm Anne Marie.
I'm sorry we disturbed you. What's his name?
Anthony.
After learning why Helen has come, Anne agrees to tell her what really happened to Ruthie, explaining that they used to be neighbors. Anne says that on the night of the murder, she heard Ruthie screaming hysterically from the apartment next door. Alarmed by the screams, Anne immediately called 911, but no officers arrived. Only after Ruthie's desperate screams continued and the situation became increasingly alarming did the police finally come to the scene. Unfortunately, by then, it was already too late. Ruthie had been brutally murdered. Ever since that night, the residents have believed that Candyman entered through the hidden opening behind the apartment wall before killing Ruthie with his hook. Anne admits that she still lives in constant fear, convinced that Candyman could appear through the walls of her apartment at any moment.
I'm scared. Scared for my child, Candyman.
That evening, Helen, Trevor, and Bernadette attend a dinner gathering with Professor Philip, an academic who has spent years researching various urban legends, including the story of Candyman. After learning that Helen is writing her thesis about the mysterious figure, Professor Philip begins explaining the origin of the Candyman legend, which is believed to have first emerged around 1890. According to him, Candyman was the son of a former black slave who became wealthy after inventing a machine capable of mass-producing shoes following the American Civil War. Thanks to his father's fortune, Candyman received an excellent education and grew up to become a remarkably talented artist. His extraordinary painting skills earned him a reputation among wealthy families and aristocrats who frequently hired him to paint their family portraits. One day, Candyman was commissioned to paint the beautiful daughter of a wealthy landowner. However, during the process, the two fell deeply in love and the young woman eventually became pregnant. Their relationship was fiercely opposed by her father, who refused to accept that his daughter had fallen in love with a black man. Enraged, he hired a mob to hunt Candyman down. Candyman was eventually chased to the area where the Cabrini Green apartment complex would later be built. There, his right hand was brutally cut off with a rusty saw, but the torture did not end there. The mob smashed open several beehives at a nearby apiary, collected the honey, and smeared it all over Candyman's body. The scent of the honey attracted countless bees, which repeatedly stung him until he died a horrific death. Afterward, his body was burned on a large pile of wood, and his ashes were scattered across the land that would eventually become known as Cabrini Green. From that moment on, the legend of Candyman was born and continued to be passed down from generation to generation.
Cabrini Green, Candyman country. Candyman was the son of a slave. He had a prodigious talent as an artist, capture his daughter's virginal beauty. Deeply in love, and she became pregnant. They chased Candyman through the town to Cabrini Green.
Sometime later, Helen returns to the Cabrini Green apartment complex to visit Anne. However, when she arrives, she only finds a young boy named Jake, who tells her that Anne is not home. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Helen asks Jake about Ruthie and the legend of Candyman. At first, Jake refuses to talk about Candyman. He believes that anyone who tells stories about him could become his next victim. Still convinced that Candyman is nothing more than a myth, Helen reassures Jake that there is nothing to be afraid of. When she asks whether he is afraid of Candyman, Jake confidently replies that he is afraid of no one. Helen responds that she is not afraid either. Since Jake still refuses to share what he knows, he instead offers to show Helen a place believed to be connected to Candyman. Helen follows Jake through the streets of Cabrini Green. Along the way, she notices a towering pile of discarded furniture and other junk. When she asks what it is for, Jake simply replies that it is being prepared for a neighborhood party. A short time later, Jake leads Helen to an abandoned public restroom. According to local rumors, the place is believed to be connected to Candyman. Jake then tells Helen about a young black boy who once entered the restroom alone. Moments later, people heard him screaming for help. A man rushed inside to rescue him, but only seconds later he stumbled back out in complete shock, his hair having turned white from sheer terror. Meanwhile, the young boy was found lying on the floor covered in blood. Ever since that incident, the local residents have believed that Candyman was responsible for the horrifying attack. Despite hearing the terrifying story, Helen boldly enters the abandoned restroom by herself.
Listen, you wait here for me, okay?
Okay.
She carefully inspects each stall one by one while documenting everything with her camera. When she opens the final toilet stall, she is startled to see a swarm of bees suddenly flying out of the toilet bowl. Just as Helen is about to leave the abandoned public restroom, she is suddenly confronted by a group of young men. One of them is carrying a metal hook and claims to be Candyman in an attempt to terrify her. Without giving Helen any chance to escape, the group brutally attacks and beats her.
Now let me go! Come on, let me go!
Fortunately, Jake quickly reports the assault to the police. Shortly afterward, officers arrive at the scene and arrest the gang's leader, while the rest of the group manages to flee. During the investigation, the police confirm that the man is indeed responsible for Ruthie's murder, as well as a series of violent crimes that had long been blamed on Candyman. Once everything is over, Helen finds Jake to thank him for saving her life. Jake still looks frightened, worried that Candyman will seek revenge against him. However, Helen reassures him that Candyman was never real. According to Helen, all the terror that has haunted the neighborhood was simply the work of a criminal who used the Candyman legend to frighten people. Now that the real culprit has been arrested, Jake has nothing left to fear. After finishing with the police, Helen meets up with Bernadette once again. Something continues to trouble her. She questions why the police only acted quickly after she became a victim, while the murders of Ruthie and the young black boy in the restroom had seemingly been ignored for years. Helen believes that if she had never been attacked, the man responsible would probably never have been arrested. Hoping to lift her spirits, Bernadette shows Helen the photographs that were successfully recovered from her camera after it had been damaged during the assault. Their research has even attracted the attention of several publishers thanks to the media coverage surrounding Helen's case. Encouraged by the unexpected interest, the two decide to begin organizing their research the following day. After parting ways with Bernadette in the parking lot, Helen continues looking through the photographs from her investigation. Without realizing it, a mysterious man slowly appears in the distance and calls out her name.
Helen, I came for you. Helen.
Who is that?
At first, Helen assumes he is just an ordinary stranger, but when the man introduces himself as Candyman, she refuses to believe him. Candyman tells her that because she has continued to doubt his existence, he has been forced to reveal himself in person. Moments later, he places Helen under a hypnotic trance, causing her to lose consciousness.
Be my victim. You are not content with the stories.
Do I know you?
I am the writing on the wall.
Sometime later, Helen suddenly awakens inside Anne's apartment, completely disoriented. Her body is covered in blood while Anne's dog has been brutally slaughtered. At the same time, Anne screams in horror after discovering that her baby boy Anthony has mysteriously disappeared. Overcome with panic, Anne immediately accuses Helen of kidnapping Anthony. Helen desperately insists that she has no idea what happened, but Anne, consumed by rage, continues attacking her until Helen is forced to defend herself. The commotion quickly attracts the attention of the neighbors, and the police soon arrive at the scene. Seeing Helen and Anne struggling with each other, the officers immediately arrest Helen. At the police station, Helen repeatedly insists that she never kidnapped Anthony. However, the police refuse to believe her and continue demanding to know where Anthony is. Since Helen has absolutely no memory of what happened after meeting Candyman, she is unable to answer any of their questions.
Please let me explain.
Ms. Lau, you're under arrest. Do you understand?
I understand.
Where's the baby?
I don't know.
Confused and desperate, she tries calling Trevor, hoping he will come and help her. Unfortunately, he doesn't answer the phone. All Helen can do is leave a voicemail on their home answering machine. She is confused because it is already 3 o'clock in the morning and Trevor should have been home asleep. Instead, he is nowhere to be found. The following morning, Trevor finally arrives with Helen's lawyer to pick her up. Although Helen is released from custody, she remains the prime suspect because the police still have not found Anthony. Her lawyer explains that she has not been formally charged since Anthony's body has not been found, meaning there is still a chance that he is alive. To avoid the swarm of reporters waiting outside the police station, Helen's face is covered as she is escorted to the car. Once they arrive home, Helen asks Trevor and her lawyer whether they truly believe she committed those crimes. Neither of them can bring themselves to answer. When asked to recall what happened that night, Helen can only say that she suddenly blacked out and woke up after everything was already over. She has no idea what actually happened. Helen then asks Trevor where he was the previous night. Trevor claims that he had been home the entire time, but was so exhausted that he fell asleep and never heard the phone ringing or the voicemail Helen had left. Shortly afterward, Trevor leaves for the university to teach his classes. Left alone in the apartment, Helen tries to calm herself by reviewing the photographs she took during her investigation at Cabrini Green. As she examines them one by one, she is shocked to discover the shadowy figure of Candyman standing behind her in one of the pictures. Disturbed, Helen walks into the bathroom. Suddenly, Candyman's hook emerges from behind the medicine cabinet. Just as Helen is about to call for help, Candyman appears right in front of her. He tells Helen that Anthony is now in his possession. Candyman then gives her two choices. She can surrender herself and become his, or she can allow Anthony to die in her place. He also explains that because Helen has doubted his existence, people have begun losing faith in the legend of Candyman. That is why he now needs Helen's sacrifice to restore his name as a story that people will once again fear and remember. As Candyman wounds Helen, her body immediately grows weak, leaving her unable to scream for help. At that very moment, Bernadette arrives at the apartment, worried about her best friend. After receiving no response when she rings the doorbell, Bernadette lets herself inside. Still conscious, Helen desperately tries to warn Bernadette to leave immediately, but it is already too late. Candyman suddenly appears and brutally murders Bernadette. A short time later, Trevor returns home and finds Helen lying on the floor, clutching a knife beside Bernadette's lifeless body. The moment Helen sees Trevor, she loses consciousness. When she finally wakes up, she finds herself lying on her bed with her hands handcuffed, while police officers have already filled the apartment. With all the evidence pointing directly at her, Helen is once again named the prime suspect, this time for Bernadette's murder. She is then taken to a psychiatric hospital for a mental evaluation. The police dismiss her claims about Candyman, believing they are nothing more than delusions caused by the trauma she has endured. On the way to the hospital, Helen once again hears Candyman whispering to her. Candyman tells her that he is nothing more than a legend kept alive through people's stories. He does not need to physically exist as long as his name continues to be whispered, remembered, and lives on in people's dreams. According to Candyman, that is the true meaning of immortality. Upon arriving at the hospital, Helen begins screaming hysterically, insisting that Candyman is standing right in front of her. However, no one else can see him. The nurses eventually calm her down by injecting her with a powerful sedative until she gradually regains control of herself. Once she has recovered, Helen is taken to meet Dr. Burke, the psychiatrist assigned to her case.
Dr. Burke?
Dr. Burke explains that Helen has been committed to the hospital for 1 month under an order issued by the district attorney's office. During that time, she has been given high doses of sedatives to stabilize her mental condition and determine whether she is fit to stand trial for the murder charges against her. When Dr. Burke asks Helen to explain what happened before Bernadette died, she can only say that she remembers absolutely nothing and cannot believe she could have murdered her own best friend. To prove that she is telling the truth, Helen claims that she can summon Candyman. Remaining seated in her chair, she turns toward the mirror in the room and slowly says Candyman's name 5 times.
Candyman. Candyman. Candyman.
At first, nothing happens. Then, without warning, Candyman suddenly appears and brutally kills Dr. Burke. Before disappearing, Candyman unlocks Helen's handcuffs so that everyone will believe she murdered the doctor as well. Taking advantage of the chaos, Helen escapes through the window and climbs into another room. There, she knocks a nurse unconscious and steals the nurse's uniform as a disguise before escaping from the hospital. Helen then returns to her apartment, hoping Trevor still believes in her innocence. Instead, she finds that the apartment has been renovated and most of her belongings are gone. Even more heartbreaking, Trevor is there with one of his female students, the woman he has secretly been having an affair with. At that moment, Helen finally realizes that on the night she desperately tried calling Trevor over and over again, he was not asleep as he had claimed. He had actually been with the other woman. The moment Trevor sees Helen unexpectedly appear, he immediately tells his student to call the hospital. Helen desperately begs Trevor to believe her. She swears that she has never killed anyone and insists that Candyman is responsible for everything that has happened. She also tells Trevor that he is the only person she has left, but Trevor no longer believes a single word she says and chooses to distance himself from her. Realizing that the apartment is no longer her home, Helen quietly walks away. After leaving her apartment, Helen returns to the Cabrini Green apartment complex. Once again, she crawls through the hidden passage behind the medicine cabinet until she reaches the secret room she had previously discovered with Bernadette. This time, Helen notices even more paintings and symbols connected to Candyman. In the middle of the room, she finds Candyman lying down. Helen then tells him that she has come to honor their agreement. She is willing to surrender herself as long as Anthony is released unharmed. Candyman reminds her that from the very beginning, she was the one he wanted, not the baby. Once again, he tries to persuade Helen to join him and become immortal. According to Candyman, death is not the end. Instead, their names will live on forever as legends passed down from one generation to the next, just as the story of Candyman has survived for all these years. To demonstrate his power, Candyman opens his robe, revealing a body completely covered in swarms of bees. The bees begin flying around and cover Helen's body until she eventually loses consciousness. Meanwhile, Candyman takes Anthony somewhere else. Sometime later, Helen regains consciousness and hears Anthony crying. Following the sound, she eventually reaches a huge pile of discarded furniture and other junk that has been prepared for the neighborhood's annual bonfire celebration in Cabrini Green. Without hesitation, she crawls into the pile in search of Anthony. At the same time, Jake and his friends spot Candyman entering the pile. Convinced that the monster responsible for terrorizing Cabrini Green is finally inside, they unknowingly pour a flammable liquid over the entire pile and set it on fire, completely unaware that Helen and Anthony are trapped inside as well.
Bones will soon be ashes.
Within moments, the flames rapidly spread and engulf the entire structure. Through the thick smoke, Helen finally finds Anthony alive. But just as she is about to carry him to safety, Candyman suddenly appears and covers her mouth to stop her from calling for help. Candyman reveals that this has been his plan from the very beginning. He wants Helen and Anthony to burn alongside him so that the three of them can live forever as an eternal legend. To Candyman, Helen is the replacement for the woman he once loved, while Anthony is the child he never had the chance to raise. That is why he wants the three of them to remain together forever and never be separated. Refusing to surrender, Helen fights back to save Anthony. She grabs a burning piece of wood and drives it into Candyman's body. Using every ounce of strength she has left, Helen shields Anthony from the raging flames while desperately trying to escape the collapsing pile of debris. When the nearby residents realize that people are trapped inside, they immediately rush over to extinguish the flames and rescue them. Anthony is safely pulled from the fire and reunited with Anne without suffering a single injury. Sadly, Helen's burns are far too severe, and she ultimately succumbs to her injuries. Meanwhile, Candyman finally disappears along with the flames. Sometime later, Helen's family and friends gather to attend her funeral. Trevor also arrives with the female student he had been having an affair with.
For in her heart she desired to do your will. The Lord bless her and keep her and give her peace.
Anne is there carrying Anthony, while Jake also comes to pay his final respects. Before leaving the cemetery, Jake throws Candyman's metal hook into Helen's grave as a final tribute to her sacrifice. Following Helen's death, Trevor is consumed by overwhelming guilt. He finally realizes that Helen had always been devoted to him, taking care of their home, preparing his meals, and always being there whenever he needed her. Meanwhile, the woman he chose could never replace the person Helen had been. His regret continues to haunt him until one night, he unknowingly says Helen's name 5 times in front of a mirror.
Helen. Helen. Oh, Helen.
Moments later, Helen's spirit appears behind him, holding a metal hook. In an instant, Trevor is brutally killed, while his new lover can do nothing but scream in horror as she witnesses his gruesome death. From that moment on, Helen becomes a vengeful spirit who can be summoned in the very same way as Candyman. And with that, the story comes to an end.